This is lesson 3 of the historical geography of the Holy Land. We'll be talking about roads, climate, agriculture, and industry. First of all, the roads and the highways. Some general observations. The broken landscape of Palestine makes it so difficult to develop new routes or to modify the old ones that the pattern remained more or less fixed at all time. At key points dominating the major road junctions, important cities were founded. And you'll be aware of those as we go along. There are 3 types of routes according to function and measure of importance. The routes may be recognized mainly by the stations that grew up along them. The international highways, and I will talk about one which is the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea, and the one in Transjordan, which is the Way of the Kings. Those are the 2 main highways. And then we have inter-regional roads going from one place to another, but these are not as nearly as important. And then we have local trails. Now, there's a description in the Bible about road building. I mentioned that this territory is so broken up that it is difficult to form new highways. Well, in Isaiah 62:10, it says, build up the highway, remove the stones. Now, this is preparation for making it accessible for the king. In Isaiah 40:3 and 4, in the desert, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain. Isaiah 57:14, build up, prepare the road, remove the obstacles out of the way of my people. And then in Isaiah 49:11, I will turn my mountains into roads, and my highways will be raised up. And finally in Jeremiah 18:15, they made them walk in bypaths and on roads not built up. So those are your secondary roads. There are several sources for reconstructing the road networks. The names of the roads and their description in the Bible and other ancient inscriptions, especially Egyptian and Assyrian, are helpful. Subject usually appears incidentally while describing travels. It usually is designated by terminal points. Archaeological investigation has revealed chains of roads. In Isaiah 9:1, in the past he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by the way of the sea along the Jordan. And the way of the Gentiles, of course, would be in the northeastern part. In Exodus 13:17, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. Now, I mentioned that Egypt is to the southwest, and if they had gone right along the coast, it would have been a short distance into the Holy Land. But there were Egyptian forts all along this route, and God didn't want them to face the forts. The Papyrus Anastasia, the first, by Hori during the reign of Ramses II, speaks about the southern section of the Via Maris. Now that's the one over here, this southern section. Of course, they would be coming up from Egypt, and so they would deal with the southern section of this route. You notice that the route comes near the coast here. It's just a short distance inland, and it goes to the city of Joppa, and then it moves inland again, joins with another route that has come. This is part of the Via Maris, and then it continues on into the area of the Phoenicians. That is one of the main routes. The bas-relief of Seti is much more detailed than Papyrus Anastasi. It speaks of this as Pharaoh's route, but the bas-reliefs of Seti have 20 stations between Sela and Gaza. Now, Sela is in Egypt. It's off on the map here, and it goes to Gaza, which is one of the main Philistine cities, but this is all under the control of Egypt in ancient times. And it lists an area from Gaza to Yaham. They come to Gaza, and then they go along the route, and they go for 150 miles in 10 days. That's 15 miles a day. But then from Gaza to Yaham, it took 11 or 12 days, and that's only 75 miles. That's probably because they are meeting opposition as they go along. We also have Egyptian evidence from Esarhaddon and Amenhotep, and all of those are speaking about cities that are on the southern part of this Via Maris. It's sometimes called the Way of the Sea. And Via Maris does mean by way of the sea. However, the true way of the sea goes from here, from Kinneret to the coast. So that is the basic way of the sea. Now the King's Highway, that is the one that is in the Transjordan Plateau. Numbers 20:17 says, "Please let us pass through your country. We will not go through any field or vineyard or drink water from any well. We will travel along the King's Highway and not turn to the right or to the left until we have passed through your territory." And then Numbers 21:22 is almost identical. This is where the Israelites are trying to get to this territory, and they are wanting to go through Edom and Moab, but those two countries will not allow them to do so. In Numbers 21:33, they turned and went up along the road towards Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, and his whole army marched out to meet them in battle at Edrei. So they have gone past Edom and Moab, have come into this area, and then in Bashan is where Og is going to meet them. The King's Highway runs the length of Transjordan highlands and extends to Damascus, which is, I believe, just off from this map to the northeast. It is a competitor to the Via Maris, especially important for the perfumes from South Arabia. There are two routes that are used in the Transjordan area and the King's Highway. You notice there is one route that comes here, and then there is another route which is not completed on this map, which is indicated here, which is farther inland. This one is the easiest to travel, but you lack water. This one is better to meet the various cities along the route, but you have to go down and up again in each of these wadis. So they both have their problems. The important settlements of Transjordan were always located along the King's Highway. The spice and perfume route, if mentioned at all in the Bible, is reference to the wilderness wanderings and the flight of Hodad the Edomite. In 1 Kings 11:18, it says they set out from Midian and went to Paran. Then taking men from Paran with them, they went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land and provided him with food. So you have these two main roads. The one is the Via Maris, and the other is the King's Highway. Now we have internal roads, and there are some that are longitudinal. Here is the site of Hebron, and to go from Hebron to Shechem, then you have to go up through the central mountain range, where Shechem is in this region of Samaria. In Judges 21:19, it says that, look, there is the annual festival of the Lord in Shiloh, to the north of Bethel and east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem. And so we're talking about the one that goes from Hebron, and then Bethel is north of that, and then it goes to Shechem, which is in this region. Jericho to the valley of BETH-SHEAN. Jericho is the one that they captured right after they came out from the Transjordan area. And you have Jericho here, and you notice that there are 6 different roads that go from Jericho. And these are what we call the minor routes, the longitudinal. And there is a story when David is fighting against Absalom in this Transjordan area, and it says that Absalom is killed by Joab, and then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Cushite. He ran the way of the Reed Sea, so that he is able to take a route that is shorter than the Cushite to inform David. And there's the way of the wilderness of Edom, and of course that would be in the country of Edom, through the desert of Edom, it mentions. When the king of Israel joined the king of Judah and the king of Edom to fight against Moab, to try to bring it into subjection, they went in this direction and they ran out of water. God provided a miracle for them. Rain fell in the mountains, and the next morning there was plenty of water for the people here where they were traveling. And we have Lachish to the valley of Ayalon. Here is the site of Lachish, and it goes from Lachish to the valley of Ayalon, and this would be up in this region. It says, the Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, who defeated them in a great victory in Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beit Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. While the army of the king of Babylon was fighting against Jerusalem and the other cities of Judah that were still holding out. Lachish and Azekah, they were the only fortified cities left in Judah. We have the city of Lachish, and the city of Jerusalem is being surrounded by the Assyrians, and this is one of the cities that still held out. Then we have latitudinal roads. In the Negev, we have Kadesh Barnea to southern Arabah. And it says in Deuteronomy 1:19, "Then as the Lord commanded us, we set out from Horeb and went toward the hill country of the Amorites through all that vast and dreadful desert that you have seen. And so we reached Kadesh Barnea." And this is also called the way to the hill country of the Amorites. Another road goes from Arad to Jebel Yustum to the Arabah. This is called the way to Edom. It goes to this territory here. In Judah, we have Lachish going to Hebron. Here we have Lachish, and we go from here to Hebron, which is in this region here. And then the valley of the Sorek to the valley of Rephaim and Jerusalem. There are several other of these minor roads that are mentioned in the scripture. In Transjordan, you have the plain of Sokoth and the valley of Jabbok, Penuel, Mahanaim, Jokbah, Rabbah, and Ammon. And not all of those are in this region. Roads are sometimes hard to follow because the land is so broken up because of the mountains and the various boulders that still remain. But let's talk about the climate or weather. And this is basically a war between the sea and the desert. The climate of Palestine is best defined as the outcome of the struggle between sea and desert. The climate is alpine to subtropical. There is a rainy season and there is a dry season. The pattern is shown to us in Deuteronomy 11:10 through 12, and here is where God contrasts the area that they are going to Egypt and Mesopotamia. The land you are entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by foot in a vegetable garden. But the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. It is a land the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year to its end. I mentioned that there are two seasons. There is the winter and the summer. In the winter, there is low pressure in the west, and in the summer, low pressure in the east. Summer is fairly stable because of this. The rain begins either in October or November and runs until May. Most of it falls from December to February. The mountains of Judah, Ephraim, and Galilee receive more rain. You notice that these are in the north. Judah, Ephraim, and Ephraim is going to be in here just above Judah, and Galilee receive most of the rain. Moab may receive more rain in drought years. That is also an interesting phenomenon. But the farther south you go, the less rainfall that you have. Another factor is that here you have mountains. And as the wind comes in from the Mediterranean and rises over these mountains, you're going to have rainfall along the western side of the mountains, virtually no rainfall on the eastern side, because the air rises, it cools, and then it leaves its rain. And then when it starts down on the other side, it warms up, and there's no reason for losing it. The rains are called the former and latter, or early and later rains. The former rains come in October, November, and they prepare the soil for plowing. And then the latter rain comes just before harvest, and it helps to harvest the crops. Deuteronomy 11:13 and 17 speak of both autumn and spring rains. Jeremiah 5:24, who gives fall and spring rains in season, who assures us of the regular weeks of harvest. And then in Hosea 6:3, he will come to us like the winter rains, like the spring rains that water the earth. Notice that the rainfall itself can be spoken of as a blessing. Joel 2:23, he sends you abundant showers, both autumn and spring rains as before. Zechariah 10:1, ask the Lord for rain in the springtime. It is the Lord who makes the storm clouds. He gives showers of rain to man and plants of the field to everyone. In Job 29:23, they waited for me as for showers and drank in my words as the spring rain. So that you notice that there Job is speaking of the various rains as the blessing that he himself gives to the people. Now, in addition to the rain, we also have dew. And dew is very important. It comes in the summer in the western Negev and the Shephelah in this area, in Mount Carmel and the Jezreel Valley. This is Mount Carmel here, and the Jezreel Valley. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, and abundance of grain and new wine. In 2 Samuel 1:21, O mountains of Gilboa. Now this is in the dirge that David wrote for Saul and Jonathan. May you have neither dew nor rain, nor fields that yield offerings of grain. And so the mountain of Gilboa is cursed. Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. That is Jacob speaking to his son Esau. Hosea 6:4, what can I do with you, Ephraim? What can I do with you, Judah? Your love is like the morning mist, like the early dew that disappears. We also have evidence of the fertility cycle and seasonal festivals, especially in the Ugaritic material. In 1 Ochet 44-46, 7 years may Baal fail, 8 the rider of clouds, without dew, without rain, without surging of the two deeps, without the goodness of Baal's voice. So these are the Ugaritic materials speaking of Baal, and he's supposed to do the same thing that Israel says Yahweh does for them. In Ugaritic 67, it says, we came to the goodness of the land of Debir, to the beauty of fields of Shelamet. We came upon Baal, prostrate on the earth. Dead is alien Baal. Perished is the prince, Lord of earth. And that, of course, answers the question of why there was no rain, because Baal is dead. In the biblical materials, in Leviticus 25, you speak of them having a Sabbath of rest. And this is going to be a blessing for them. And it mentions that God is going to give them enough rain, and they will produce enough grain that it will keep them over the Sabbath year. We also have a Gezer calendar that has been found that speaks about the 12 months of the year. His 2 months in gathering. His 2 months sowing. His 2 months late sowing. His month chopping grass or flax. His month barley harvest. His month harvest and measuring. His 2 months vine tending, and his month summer fruit. Now all of these are accompanied with the month, and so we can say that it begins in September, October, and goes to August, September, when the final harvest is brought in. We have a lot of agriculture in Palestine. In Deuteronomy 11:9, it's a land flowing with milk and honey. And what we mean by that, of course, is that the milk is from the cattle or the goats. They provide the milk, and the honey is what the land produces. A land with wheat and barley, vines, fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey. Also in 1 Kings, we have the provisions of Solomon for each day. And those are extensive. There are 12 areas that the land has been divided up into, and one area is responsible for each month of the year. Then there is also animal husbandry. You'll recall that the Reubenites and the Gadites had very large herds and flocks, and they didn't want to cross the Jordan River into Canaan. And so they saw that the land of Jazer and Gilead were suitable for livestock, and so they were allowed to stay there. In the time of David, when he is running from Saul, there is a man near Carmel, very wealthy. It said that he had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. That's when the wife of Nabal meets him and provides him with the food that he was wanting. The northern Negev is a pasture for flocks. And it mentions that Uzziah built towers in the desert and dug many cisterns because he had much livestock in the foothills and in the plain. He had people working his fields and vineyards in the hills and in the fertile lands, for he loved the soil. Then we also have some subsidiary perfume and medicinal balm, but this doesn't seem to come from Israel proper, but it comes from across the Jordan. The camels came in the time of Joseph. The camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. So we know that they were going to go down to Egypt, and so they sold Joseph to them. And then in Genesis 43:11, Jacob tells his sons, a little balm, a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. They're supposed to take these as a gift for the man that is going to give them the food. And Jeremiah speaks about the balm in Gilead. And so that over in this area, there is balm that is used medicinally. In Israel, we have natural farming without irrigation in some areas. But the main agricultural products require good rain. I mentioned that they weren't going to irrigate the fields like they did in Egypt, but God is going to send the rain. In Deuteronomy 7-8, "For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and pools of water, with springs flowing in the valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce, and you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron, and you can dig copper out of the hills." There probably was a little bit of commerce also in this area, because it mentions they had camels and she-asses, and those were used for hauling materials. They used the trade routes. One was the Way of the Sea, or the Via Maris, and the other was the King's Highway. We also know that there was some navigation. In the time of Solomon, he had boats built here at Etzion-Geber, down in the Gulf, and his men went out, and they were with the Phoenicians, who were used to the sea, and they would bring back articles for Solomon every 3 years. There is industry or commerce in the ancient Near East. Wood is a major product of Phoenicia. So most of the wood is going to come from north of Israel. That's where you get your cedar, your pine, your fir trees. They have fir from Sinir, that's Mount Hermon, cedar from Lebanon, oak comes from Bashan, and pine from Cyprus. So there we're going out into the Mediterranean to the land of Cyprus. Other commercial products which served Phoenician commerce: Egypt provided linen made from flax. And note that in earlier days, she also produced alabaster bowls, costly gems, and gold, and colored rugs with cords twisted and tightly knotted. So you can see that a lot of commerce was going on in the biblical period.